What I'd like to do is, I'm actually going to give 5 talks. We'll be done by midnight, I promise. And I'll stop after each one, and then you can ask questions. You'll see why I'm saying I'm giving 5 talks. But really, it won't take up the whole time. But please ask questions in the middle. If you have a question and sort of frame the discussion.
Yeah, are you looking for life as intelligence, or are you looking for any form of what could be?
I'll talk about that. That's my talk. That's exactly, the answer to that question is my talk, and it's actually my job. In fact, let me just go to it. This is what I'm doing. Is searching for a second genesis of life. So in fact, searching for life not as we know it. I can see life as we know it all the time. I mean, it's right here. You had it for breakfast, for lunch, and probably for dinner. What we're looking for is something that's alien. And we actually now have a specific definition of alien. An alien is something that is not on this tree of life. This is the tree of life. All life forms on Earth map onto this tree. What we're looking for is something that's not on this tree. If you're on this tree, it means you have DNA, and you use this DNA to make proteins using a particular information transfer system called translation and a ribosome and that sort of stuff. And it's the same on all organisms on this tree. That's kind of a wonderful result of science, but it means that we only have one example to study. And I remember the song that when I was a kid, Three Dog Night, 1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. And that's my motivation for what we're searching for. We're looking for something else. Now, if you remember the song, I'm sure you all do, it goes on to 2 can be as bad as 1. That's where they got it wrong. And I've written to the songwriters and asked them to correct it. 2 is not as bad as 1. If we could show that life happened twice in our solar system, then 2 is as good as a billion. Right? So 1 is indeed the loneliest number, and that's all we've got is 1. But if we can get to 2, then 2 is as good as a billion. Right? If life started twice in our solar system, the galaxy's got billions of examples of life in the world. We know there's lots of stars, we know there's lots of planets, then we know there's lots of biologists. That's the question that I'm interested in. So that's what we want to do. That's this life is common in the universe. Of my editorial comment, yay. It'd be good to know that life is common in the universe. But also, it could have practical benefits because right now, everything we know about life is based on studying this tree. Everything we know about medicine, everything we know about antibiotics, everything we know about pest control, everything we know about everything biological. And biology is arguably the most important science to the human condition. It's all based on 1 data point. Right? Maybe if we had 2 data points, we would do better. And I have some ideas on how that could be, but I don't want to dwell on it. The point is our understanding of nature has always been data-driven. We have 1 data point, we get 2, that would be good. So that's fundamentally what I'm going to talk about, is searching for another example of life. Where will we search? So this is the 5 worlds that fill my day. 9 to 5, I go in, I say, what's happening on Mars, what's happening on Europa, Enceladus, Titan, and now Kepler 186f. These are the 5 worlds that I think could tell us a story about second genesis. Mars, past water; Europa, moon of Jupiter with an ocean; Enceladus, a recent star to the list; a small moon of Saturn with an icy jet; Titan, a moon of Saturn with liquid but not water. Gets to the question of life completely different, life living in a different liquid. And then recently, as you probably heard, Kepler 186f, the first discovery of an Earth-sized world in the habitable zone of a star slightly smaller than the Sun. That could be our first Earth, distant Earth. So these are the 5 worlds that I want to talk about. These are the worlds that motivate the search for life. Now I want to talk a little bit about what got me into the field, just like this previous speaker did. And this is it. Actually, let me stop it because we need to hook up the sound. I forgot about that. Can we hook up sound? I'll just narrate it. I know the theme by heart. Wait, here we go. Okay, yeah, that's a great idea, brilliant. So just pick it up with the mic.
Do spot.
Okay, there's two things about this scene that got me thinking and sent me in the direction I'm in. One is I decided I wanted Spock's job, not Kirk's job. That's when I put aside the basketball and got friendly with the calculus book. The second thing is I wanted a tricorder. That would really be wonderful. Detecting life forms 100 miles in solid rock. Pretty amazing. You can't quite do that yet. And if you go to Larry Krauss's wonderful book and look up tricorder in the appendix, in the index, it's not there at all. He doesn't even guess at how a tricorder works. So I leave that as an exercise to the audience. How does a tricorder work? How does it detect life? And those of you who remember that episode, it's episode 26. In the original series, of course, it's about halfway through the episode. I think it's at time 26 in the episode. They're not just detecting the creature, they're detecting a silicon-based creature. So it's really pretty amazing. But this is 300 years in the future. What I want to focus on is what are we going to learn in 20 years in the future. So these are the four talks I want to talk about. What may we expect in 20 years in astrobiology? There's four, I think, discoveries that could be fundamental to our understanding of life and a search for second genesis. So what I want to do is I just have 2 slides on each of these. So if you don't have questions about them, these talks will be very, very short. First, I think we will discover oxygen-rich atmosphere on an Earth-like exoplanet, like Kepler 186f. Second, I think we will discover biochemistry, not just chemistry and not just organic chemistry, but biochemistry in organics from Mars or Enceladus. Third, I think we might discover that hydrogen is being consumed by biology on Titan, liquid methane life. And fourth, we will create in the lab mirror life in the laboratory. All of these things point towards searching for a second genesis of life. So what I'm going to do is just introduce each one and then stop after each one, and we can discuss it if you have questions. Because they're really very different topics. 500 light years away, an M-class planet. There it is. Kepler 186f, just 10% larger than the Earth. And we know that it is in the habitable zone of a star smaller than the Sun. So it's not Earth-like planet around the Sun-like star, but it's pretty close. Right? Here is Earth in the habitable zone of our solar system. Good for that. Here's Kepler 186, the habitable zone in our system. Now, right now, all we know about this world is its mass, really its size, and its distance from its star. We don't know if it's got an atmosphere, we don't know if it has water, we don't know if it's got oxygen in its atmosphere. But we will soon. Kepler has done an amazing job of lining up the suspects. I call them empty houses. We know there's lots of empty houses in space now from Kepler. There's a bumper sticker of a car, somebody parks in my parking lot at work, and it says, "Good planets are hard to find." I feel like going over and changing it. No, there are lots of good planets out there. They're easy to find, but we don't know yet how good they are, but we will soon. In the next 10 years, there's 2 directions in which we will learn about these worlds. One is space-based systems like this, space-based interferometer, large baseline interferometry to be able to resolve angular separation small enough to see the difference between a planet and its star and get spectrum. Or ground-based systems. It's amazing. Whatever NASA does in space, the astronomers on the ground very quickly catch up and pass it. They're doing that now. This is the truck delivering the planet detector to Gemini 2 in South America. So one of these two systems will look at this world or others like it, and one day we will find oxygen, the signal of oxygen on that world. Technically, we won't be detecting oxygen, we'll be detecting ozone, the 9.3 micron band of ozone, because it's the strongest band, but you don't get oxygen without ozone. Or sorry, you don't get ozone without oxygen. That, to me, will be a banner day. We will then have very persuasive evidence that there is life on that world and that the conditions on that world are suitable for the development of complex creatures, plants, and animals. And because we look at the history of the Earth, as oxygen built up, complexity in biology built up. That's the first discovery. I think that'll be within 10 or 15 years easily. End of talk one. Any questions about exoplanets? Anybody ready to move to Kepler 186f?
I didn't get how you're deciding what's habitable. I mean,
Well,
how do you know?
How do I know? That's a good question. And I'll come back to that in some of these other talks, especially on Titan, where habitability is different. For the exoplanets and for Mars and Enceladus, our definition of habitable is very simple: liquid water. Because that's the definition of habitability that applies to life as we know it. On these two discoveries, we're looking for life as we know it. So the definition is liquid water. Here, we're looking at a different liquid, not water. So when we look at this planet, we want to know, is there liquid water on it? And that's something we can determine spectroscopically too. We can look at water bands in the atmosphere. But the real interesting thing is if we could look at this planet and see oxygen in the atmosphere. We would also look for water vapor in the atmosphere. We'd also look for nitrogen in the atmosphere. But finding water in it wouldn't be too exciting. We see water on Mars and Venus. Finding carbon dioxide wouldn't be too exciting. We see carbon dioxide on Mars and Venus. Finding nitrogen wouldn't be too exciting. We'd find nitrogen on Mars and Venus. What would be exciting is if we see oxygen, high levels of oxygen. There's no way we think that can happen on an Earth-like world unless plants, photosynthesis, cyanobacteria are cranking away oxygen. So oxygen is what I'm hoping for. The others will come, sure, we'll do all that other stuff too, but it's the oxygen that will be the excitement. Oh, okay, great.
If it's a biology 2-based system, why wouldn't you say that whatever that life form is, its product is?
Yeah. Why would we expect that life on this world would make oxygen just because we did?
Exactly.
This goes back to the water. But the reason this is in the habitable zone is because it's in the zone where liquid water can be persistent. And water's got oxygen on it, and it becomes the obvious thing to use in photosynthesis. And so it's likely to be a product of photosynthesis on any water world, oxygen. Now, if we go to Titan, not a water world, oxygen is not a byproduct of biological production there, right? But on a water world, it likely is. And the reason we think it's so important is because oxygen seems to be required to power complex life. Trees and plants and large multicellular organisms don't appear on Earth until oxygen appears. And virtually all of them require oxygen. Those that don't used to and have now become parasitic lifestyle. So we think that there is a cause and effect relationship between oxygen and biological complexity. I wouldn't say we fully understand it, but that's what the record seems to indicate. So if you're thinking microbes are great, but what could there be something more interesting, then that's why oxygen is such a key molecule, because it really is rocket fuel. The energy that's released when we burn rock, when we take, say, an organic material, typical organic material, preferably chocolate, and consume it and react it with oxygen, we get an enormous energy return from that reaction. And that's what allows us to maintain the big, giant bodies that we have. Well, some of us do. I try to stay thin, but you know. Okay, any other questions about these exo worlds? Back here. Mike's coming around. I'll mention while we're waiting, Kepler no longer functioning, but the data that it generated is still being harvested, so we still expect more planets to come out from the Kepler original data set. Question?
Well, okay, so this is going to be maybe a little bit of a controversial question, maybe.
but I think it impacts everything you're talking about. Is I know we want to do all this research, but right now with the the cancellation of the space shuttle, and then now that I guess Russia has said they want to allow astronauts under rockets, what can you tell us about how NASA plans to
do
carry
these
on?
things. Yeah.
What's on the table for like that project and having more astronauts in space?
Yeah, there's a couple questions wrapped up in what you're saying. One is the politics in Russia and blah blah blah. That's actually good news because it is the problem with Russia and the U.S. being unfriendly with Russia and vice versa motivates the U.S. to develop its own launch capability. So in a way, that's good news in a negative sort of way. The technologies talking about here do not require astronauts. This could launch in an ELD and without any astronauts. And this, of course, is Earth-based. The push for these things is going up because of Kepler results. Kepler launched about 4 years ago, and it really opened the whole field of exoplanets. Before Kepler, there was 100 exoplanets. Now there's thousands and thousands of them. And it's really, everybody at NASA was surprised at how much people got into Kepler and the discovery of exoplanets. They just weren't prepared for the enthusiasm. I certainly hadn't predicted that there'd be that much interest in exoplanets. And so there's this groundswell of support for follow-up missions. NASA's now approved a follow-up mission to Kepler. So that's going to carry missions like this into the priority queue, I predict. And everybody realizes that this is a really cool field. We've got worlds that we can point at. We know where to look. So it's really, over the last 4 years, this whole exoplanet thing and the search for Earth-like world has changed dramatically. Okay, let me go to the second story. The second story is our solar system. Mars, we're very excited about Mars because we think billions of years ago it looked like Earth. Now we have rovers there, Curiosity drilling down into the ground, finding dark materials. It sounds kind of simple-minded. Mars is red, we drill a little deep and it's red. We're very excited about that. That change in color is very exciting. What's more, this gray stuff smells like rotten eggs, which made it even more exciting. It's my favorite smell these days, rotten eggs, hydrogen sulfide. I'm sure that we're on the track to finding organics here on Mars in this gray stuff, even with the rotten eggs. The other place where I'm sure we're on our track to finding organics, because we already found it, is this little tiny star Enceladus. It's not a star, sorry, it's a world, it's a moon. But I think it's a star, metaphorically, not literally. It's got a geyser coming out the South Pole. It's 500 kilometers across, so it's about the size of the state of Oregon. So it's not big, it's not as big as the moon, it's not as big as the Earth. But it's really cool because it has a jet of water coming out. And the flux of water is equal to the flux of water from Old Faithful geyser. So this is a huge amount of water coming out. And in that water, there's organic material. It's not water, it's soup coming out. There are many, many organisms on Earth that we know that would live in that soup. It's got nutrients, it's got organics, it's got ammonia, it's got biological sources of energy. It's a habitable environment. We are working on a mission to go collect some of that stuff and bring it back to Earth, right? Which is tricky, because the reason we want to collect it is because we think there's life in it. Well, bringing alien life back to Earth, there's a lot of regulations, as you might know. Forms to fill out, right? And they're not just NASA regulations. That is controlled by international treaty and international law. The Committee on Space Research mandates these things. So our biggest hurdle right now is figuring out how do you safely bring back a container which you hope has alien life in it, right? You don't want to release it for obvious reasons. So on both Mars and Europa, in the next 10, 15 years, we're going to have in our hands, alien, or not alien, but organic material from another world. And then we want to figure out, is it evidence of a second genesis? Is it evidence of life? What will we do with that material? We will search in that material for biomolecules, the sophisticated, complex molecules that biology builds. I call them the buildings of the molecular world. These have the relationship to simple molecules as buildings have to stones. You see a building, it's obviously been designed, functions for a particular reason, there's interacting parts, etc. The building may be built of stones, but the building obviously indicates some sort of architectural intent, and that is what these molecules indicate. DNA, proteins like perchlorate reductase, ATP, phospholipids. These are complex biopolymers that if we find them on Mars or Enceladus, they are unequivocal evidence for life. We don't necessarily have to find something alive. In fact, we have to kill it to do this analysis anyway, so it might as well be dead and save us the ethical issue of having to kill it. Right? But this is what we'll look for. So we want to get our hands on this organic material and look for these kind of biomolecules. So we have a specific test of what we'd like. And what we'd like to find is biomolecules that are like the ones in Earth life, but different. And let me give you my favorite example is amino acids. In your body, the proteins are all made up of left-handed amino acids. Biology on Earth drives on the left-hand side of the amino acid road. Okay? Suppose we went to Enceladus and found it had a bunch of amino acids. That's cool. But suppose they were all right-handed. That would be way cool. Way cool is twice as cool as cool. Because that would say not only is it evidence of life, but it's evidence for a different type of life. Just like folks in England that drive on the other side of the road are a different type of life than folks here that drive on the right side of the road. Right? So biomolecules can tell us a lot. We'll get them on Mars and Europa. So we expect Mars and Enceladus. We expect life there to be similar to us because it is water. There's our water worlds. So what carbon chemistry and water worlds, we expect some differences, but fundamentally they're going to be similar. Now on Titan, the story gets completely bizarre. There's only 2 worlds in our solar system. Oh, sorry, I should stop and ask for questions. This is end of story 2. Any questions about Mars and Enceladus and the search for life by searching for these biomolecules on Mars and Enceladus? Question here.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there was a meteorite that was discovered from Mars that was supposed to have some evidence of life.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. The question was, didn't we discover a meteorite? In fact, Alan Hill's 84001 was the name of it, that we knew came from Mars, and that was thought that it had evidence of life in it. It's actually a remarkable result that we have meteorites from Mars, more than 30 of them. There's one in the building, in the lobby of my building, FYI. We know they come from Mars because inside the meteorites there are little plaques made on Mars. Inside the meteorite there's little bubbles, and those bubbles trap Mars air, and it's the same as measured by Viking on the surface of Mars. So we know that they came from Mars. About 15 years ago there was a report that inside one of the meteorites was possible evidence for life, but that is just not held up at all. We did not see anything like this, anything like a biomarker. What they saw was little tiny magnetic crystals. That was the strongest evidence for life, that were similar to the nanoscale crystals made by magnetotactic bacteria. And at that time, the only process known to produce those nanoscale magnetotactic magnets was biology. But now it's been shown that shock processes can also make them. So the evidence of the meteorite has effectively gone away. Another question?
Yeah, I wondered in the Cassini end of mission, are you going by Titan or by Enceladus? And my second part of my question is, do you know that you have the right machinery to actually detect a different life when you find it? Because it sounds like you're looking for Earth life, and it might be something very different that we haven't got equipment for.
Right. Okay, there's 2 questions. The first question was about Cassini's end of the Cassini mission. This picture is taken by Cassini. Cassini has been the highly successful joint US-European mission to the Saturn system. It reached the Saturn system in 2005, and it's been cruising around ever since. It detected this plume on Enceladus, and it's flown through it several times, which is how we know that this has organics in it. We didn't expect the plume, and we don't really have the instruments on Cassini to analyze it the way we'd really like. It's got, as you indicated, Cassini is now in its end of mission phase. At the end of its mission, it will crash into Saturn. I believe it's another 2.5 years. And it will fly by Enceladus a couple more times and fly by Titan many more times. Your second question, how do we know we have the right tools to detect life? This is an important question, and this is the approach we're taking for water-based life. Look for the kind of molecules that work well in water. We don't know if that's right. We have to always remember that everything we know is based on one data point. And so we should be prepared to be surprised. But nonetheless, we've got a plan, right? You plan the best as you can, fully expecting that when you actually implement the plan, there'll be surprises. And I'm looking forward to those surprises. Who knows what they'll be? When we go to Titan, we know we can't use these tools, because there we're looking for life in liquid methane. So let me go to that story. This is Titan. And the fascinating thing about Titan is that there are only 2 worlds that we know of in the whole galaxy that have liquid on their surface. One is Earth, and it has water, and the other is Titan. Another way of saying it, there's only 2 places in the galaxy that we know right now that have beaches, right? Earth and Titan. Now on Earth, the beach is liquid water, and the molecule for building life is carbon. So we are carbon-based life living in liquid water. On Titan, there's also lots and lots of carbon. So life is almost certainly going to be carbon-based, but the liquid is not water. It's liquid methane. Very different than liquid water. It's a non-polar, very cold, not a very good solvent. Could there be life on it? Well, this goes to your question. Life here would be so different that we don't even know, we can't even begin to design a test to detect it. What kind of molecules would this life use for storing information? It certainly wouldn't be DNA. What kind of molecules would it use for energy? It certainly wouldn't be ATP. Those wouldn't work in liquid methane. We have no clue. So the approach that we've been taking is a completely different one. Instead of looking for life, we look for pollution. Okay? On Earth, life is widespread. As a result, it causes pollution. It causes oxygen, which is pollution. The oxygen we breathe was a byproduct of metabolism from cyanobacteria billions of years ago, when they ruined the planet. We, of course, we humans are getting rid of the oxygen, bringing back the CO2, restoring the Earth to its environmentally correct condition. And many species will thank us for doing it. Right? But this is the nature of life. When life is widespread, it causes widespread pollution. You can see it in the methane that's being produced now. You can see it every year in CO2. Plants spew out CO2 in the fall, and then they soak it back up in the summer. It goes up and down, up and down. These are global effects on the environment from the fact that life is widespread. So life steers the Earth somewhat recklessly, and we humans are contributing to that recklessness. Well, if there's life on Titan, and it's widespread, because the liquid that lives in is widespread, it should also have some kind of global effect. There won't be oxygen, there won't be CO2. Methane isn't very interesting because there's gobs of it on Titan already. So we were searching what would the effect of life on Titan be. Even if we can't recognize the life, we might be able to recognize what it does. And the answer is, the prediction is that it would eat hydrogen. Life on Titan would consume hydrogen for many of the same reasons we consume oxygen as an energy source. On Earth, the game is oxygenating organics. On Titan, the game is hydrogenating organics. So the prediction would be that if there's life on Titan, near the bottom of the ground on Titan, there would be an anomalous depletion of hydrogen. Now, interestingly, we made this prediction in 2005, and in 2010, a paper appeared saying that there was a depletion of hydrogen near the surface of Titan. For a few seconds, I got very excited. Then I read the paper, and it was a modeling discussion. It was a computer model. And they found that in order to fit the data, they had to postulate a sink of hydrogen at the surface. Well, computer models are not the same as data. No insult to you computer modelers in the audience, but a model is just a guess. And models are often wrong. In fact, they're usually wrong. So I don't take that as serious. But it motivated the whole question that the way to search for life on Titan is to search for hydrogen and its signature in the lower parts of the atmosphere. So we are pushing on missions that might do that. So maybe 15, 20 years from now, we have a mission that carefully measures the hydrogen in Titan. If there's biology there, there's hardly any other way to explain the hydrogen loss at the surface than biology. It's a very stable gas. It shouldn't be present. It should have a constant mixing ratio. If it doesn't, biology is a strong case for it. And that would be strange biology, because nobody we know lives in liquid methods. Don't try it at home. It's very incompatible with life as we know it. Anybody have any questions on this? This is our third story. This is Titan. First one in which we get the possibility close to home of really alien life, really not liquid water life.
So if there was life using hydrogen, what's the source of generating more hydrogen over the eons?
It's a good question. The question is, if there's life on Titan eating hydrogen, where's it getting the hydrogen from? It's getting it from sunlight. High in Titan's atmosphere, the sun is producing acetylene and hydrogen and other organics, and those flow down to the surface. So the little organisms down on the surface just have to sit there and open their mouth, and it just drops in. It's a great job if you can get it. Yeah. There's no need for primary productivity. You just can be a heterotroph. Just sit there and eat it. Manna from heaven. It's coming. Sunlight is being turned into nutrients up in the stratosphere, and it settles down as a rich organic haze. So it's compared. Folks on Titan looking at Earth will say, well, there's a world with liquid. Could there be life there? They go, no way. That liquid is so warm, so hot, and so chemically aggressive that anything living there would have to eat 3 times a day just to stay alive. And would have to make its own food. There isn't food coming down from the sky. No chance of life on that planet. This is habitability. This is the way it was created. That creation meant. So, question here?
What keeps the atmosphere on Titan?
What keeps the atmosphere on Titan? Now you're getting into things we don't know. Titan is the only moon in the solar system with a thick atmosphere. Its atmosphere is 1.5 times thicker than the Earth's. And how it can maintain that atmosphere, and where it came from, and how long it'll be there, we don't really have a clue. Before Cassini was launched, when I got involved in Titan was in 1982 as a postdoc. The data came back in 2005. It was a 20-year episode. When in 1982, when we were thinking about this mission, we were sure that Titan was covered everywhere with an ocean a kilometer deep. And we thought that's how it maintains the atmosphere, from this thick ocean. We were so sure of it that the probe was built as a boat. And there was an instrument coming through the keel of the boat to measure the properties of the ocean as we floated in it. Right? So 1996, we're halfway to Titan, and Hubble images show that it's not an ocean. Maybe there's just small seas. Well, so then we were thinking we're going to land near the shore. When we landed, we actually landed well away from any of the water into what looked like an absolute desert. Now, of course, NASA and ESA stood up and said this mission was 100% successful. Pay no attention to the fact that we landed a boat in the desert. So that just wasn't mentioned at all. But associated with that change in perspective was a realization that we have no idea where the atmosphere came from. So we went then to thinking, well, it must be coming from volcanoes, so-called cryovolcanoes. So the next 5 years we spent searching through the imaging data for evidence of cryovolcanism. Nothing. So we're really now at a loss. So anybody have any ideas? Email it to me, please. We really have no idea where Titan's atmosphere came from. My current pet theory is that for most of Titan's history it was frozen, like Triton. It was just an ice floral, where the atmosphere was frozen into the ground, and then as the sun got brighter, the sun is getting brighter with time. As it ages, it gets brighter. We hope we all do, don't we? It gets brighter, and it reached a point where a runaway greenhouse was triggered, and the atmosphere popped up. And this could have been as recently as 300 million years ago. So in that case, Titan's atmosphere is a recent addition to the planet. But this is not by any means an accepted theory, although there's at least 1 or 2 papers out that are now pushing in that direction. One of them by us, so that's not independent evidence. But it's another reason to visit this world. Question here?
I have a little side question. You said that, I believe it's the presence of oxygen on Earth that made creatures able to grow bigger. Is that correct?
Yeah, complex life requires oxygen.
You just said that. So as we deplete the oxygen in the atmosphere, if we survive, are we all going to get gradually smaller and smaller?
Go back to microscopic. Go back to our microscopic origins. No, I think what will happen is we'll stop depleting the oxygen. I think reverting the Earth to its pre-oxygen state is not an option. And even Congress must see the wisdom. There's a point where you just get beyond bipartisan squabbling. And I think oxygen is one of those points. I have faith in the democratic system. Okay, any more Titan questions before we go to the last chance that we'll have for a second Genesis in the next 20 years? And I think that chance is right here on Earth, and that is make it in the lab. And this, in a sense, follows up on the previous talk on the wonderful things that people can do, not just in material science, but also in biochemistry, with manipulating matter and manipulating biological matter at very small scales, and the emerging field of synthetic biology. So the synthetic biology folks asked me a couple years ago to come and give a talk to their meeting. I thought, well, what would I want the synthetic biology folks to do? And the answer that I suggested to them is what I want them to do is create an alternate type of life. Now, that sounds kind of audacious. They can't even yet reproduce the type of life we have, right? So how do you expect them to make an alternate? But the problem is actually easy if they focus on making life that's the mirror image of life that we have. Remember I told you that life on Earth uses left-handed amino acids. We've already shown in the laboratory that we can make proteins out of right-handed amino acids, and they work just like the left-handed ones, only they're specific for right-handed. So we're pretty sure that chemistry can be on either side of the road. It just has to be all on one side, all on the other. So imagine creating a mirror image of E. coli, in which every cell, every molecule is flipped into its mirror image. So all the L amino acids, all the left-handed amino acids become right-handed amino acids. All the right-handed sugars become left-handed sugars. All the spiraling DNA spirals the other way. Everything is its mirror image. And this is a fundamental puzzle in the natural world. Stand in front of a mirror. Why does the mirror flip left and right, but it doesn't flip top and bottom? This is a famous question. And if you don't know the answer, actually, there's a YouTube video where Feynman answers the question. It takes about 3 hours of listening to it over and over again before you get it, but the question's in there. How does the mirror know to flip left and right, but it doesn't flip top and bottom? But anyway, we could flip everything, and then in principle have a second Genesis created in the laboratory. And if everything we think is right, it should work. Now I stick the rabbit in there from Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass as a reminder that maybe the mirror is not the same as the natural world. Maybe there is what physicists would call parity violation. That we're all on this side of the mirror for a reason, and that this side of the mirror doesn't work. We don't know. Everything we know and everything we've done experimentally suggests that both sides of the mirror should work. We should be able to create a completely different type of life that is simply the mirror image of the life as we know it. And in fact, this field is moving along. It's moving along enough that literally just a week ago, we put in a proposal, NASA Ames, the crazy folks at NASA Ames, plus the Ventnor Institute in San Diego, put in a proposal to headquarters to do just this, to start just this, by showing that we could to make the ribosome, for those of you technically inclined, make the ribosome produce D peptides by having it fed D amino acids by flipping all the tRNA synthasase that bring the D enzymes to the ribosome. So just a little technical footnote means, there's a way of saying we think we know first step to start this process, and we're actually trying to do it. So I think in 10 or 15 years, we could have mirror life in a jar. And that would be fundamental. It would show that the way we do biology, life as we know it, is not the only way to do it. Now, it's not as exciting as finding it naturally, but it's certainly an interesting step. And then this is the last slide, and it's my cue to once again ask you for questions, and thank you for your participation. Yeah, we've got time for more questions if there are any more.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty amazing. Yeah, very interesting. When you talk about 20 years out, and you talk about a water world, won't we have too much water on this planet when the glaciers melt? Is there anything that we can address relative to that issue?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's one of the global effects that humans are having. I said life has global effects. We're cranking up the CO2 and other greenhouse gases, and that will raise the water level. We won't raise it too high, unless you live in a place like Manhattan, which is, I wouldn't advise anyway. If you take a GPS and see what the elevation of your house is, and if it's less than 10 or 15 meters, think about moving uphill in the next 100 years or so. So the worst case scenario is indeed we will flood the coastal areas. Florida will be gone. I grew up there, no great loss in my opinion, not personal, but it's just too hot to be habitable. It's not in the habitable zone. I grew up before air conditioning was invented, so I could bias my perspective on it. So the point is that it'll inconvenience us humans, because we tend to live in low areas. We tend to live, many of our major cities are in coastal areas. In fact, many large areas of our settlements are in coastal areas. Those will be inundated. But in terms of life on Earth on a bigger scale, that won't be a big problem.
Nothing about a fifth extinction? Nothing about fifth extinction? Is there anything?
Well, humans are generating a disastrous effect on the diversity of large organisms. But the focus of my work is on microorganisms. And in fact, except for the specific disease-causing microorganisms like smallpox, it's actually a virus, humans have not had much of an impact on the microbiosphere. It doesn't care about us, and we can't really do much to hurt them. We can do a lot to hurt ourselves. We can do a lot to hurt other creatures that are roughly our size. And we think of those as life, but in fact, those are just the garnish on the tree of life. Go back to the tree. Most of life, most of the biochemical diversity, and most of the ecological cycling of biology on the Earth is done by these guys, the microorganisms. Plants and animals and everything that we in a colloquial sense call life are up here, the animals and plants, just on the tip of these little branches. We're really just window dressing on the tree of life. Not that I don't dismiss the importance of huge species, big species, and humans. We're important at window dressing. But from the Earth as a habitable planet, we're not coming close to endangerment. Other questions? Question here.
Can you speak a little bit about Europa, the potentials of finding life there, and also what information we have on it?
Yeah, Europa was our second love. Mars, we learned about it in the 70s, Europa in the 80s, 2005, 2014. Europa has a special place because it's got this huge ocean under ice. And the problem is that we can't figure out how to get to the ocean. And the other problem is that Europa is so close to Jupiter that it's within Jupiter's Van Allen belts. So it is pummeled with high energy radiation, enough to kill the electronics on the mission, not to mention humans. So there's a movie out, Europa Report. In fact, they're going to do a special showing of it up in the city. And they asked me to come and talk about Europa. The first thing I'll say is, well, this movie's nice, but humans would not want to go to Europa. You get a lethal dose of radiation in about a few minutes. It's really intense. So it makes it very challenging to land there or have a mission go there. And it's so challenging that NASA, after trying for many years to design the next mission to Europa, essentially gave up and put out a call for ideas. Anybody figure out how to do a mission to Europa for $1 billion or less? It's sort of an act of desperation. And in fact, some of us put a mission together. Hamill's in the audience and myself were part of a team that put a concept in to land in one of the chaos regions of Europa, not to drill through the ice, just to put a hydrophone on the ground and a camera. So we just look and listen, survive 1 Europa year, which is just a highfalutin way to say 85 hours, because that's how long it takes Europa to go around Jupiter, and just listen to the ice crack. So take a small step. So Europa is interesting, but it's really challenging. Compared to Enceladus, where all you got to do is fly through the plume, stick your hand out, grab a bunch of pieces. There's a big sign, 3 samples, take 1. And another sign, take 2. And so this is part of the reason I favor Enceladus and put it in the 20-year time frame is because it's so easy to get samples. Europa could be 50, 100 years before we're in the water in Europa. It's a much harder problem. Question here?
I have a question about, do we still know there is any other life exists or like aliens? And I watch a lot of videos on YouTube about aliens happening or exist.
Well, there's 2 questions to that. One, the INS thinks that there's aliens, but they define aliens. They define aliens the wrong way. They define aliens geographically. And so you're an alien if you're from a certain place, and you're not an alien if you're from another place. And interestingly, that's the way we used to define aliens. When I was a kid, aliens were from another planet. And if you were from another planet, you're an alien. And if you're an alien, you must be from another planet. But now, as I said, we no longer define aliens geographically. The INS is way behind the times. We define aliens biochemically. If your chemistry is on this tree, you're not an alien, you're one of us no matter where you live. If you're on Mars, and you have the same DNA, the same translation and protein production machinery that life on Earth has, you're our cousin. We're moving in. If you don't map on this tree, if you have DNA but it's written in a different language, then you're an alien. So we're chemistry. Our definition of alien is changed to biochemistry instead of geography. As to aliens visiting the Earth, as far as I can tell, there's no evidence, no useful evidence at all. If there was, I'd be right there. Second Genesis, I don't care if they come to us or we go to them, that's what I'm interested in, but so far there's no useful evidence. People often say, well, you're at NASA, don't you guys have a secret locker where you've got aliens stored? I go, yes, you're right, and here's a picture of them. These organisms are not on the tree of life, therefore they meet my definition as alien. So I spilled the beans, there you go. Question in the back?
What do you think about extremophiles and also like possibly taking life from here and putting it on another planet, see what happens or how it changes?
That's a good question about extremophiles. And it made me think about something that I hadn't, in the way I hadn't thought of before. Literally yesterday, a reporter called me up because I had just written a paper about searching for life on exoplanets. And she said, well, what's new? Isn't it the same old search for life you've been doing on the solar system? I said, yeah, it is, the same old stuff. But as I was writing this paper, I realized that there's a big difference. In our solar system, these are the worlds we're looking at. Mars, Europa, Enceladus, Titan. And they're all cold and nasty and brutish and small, to quote Hobbes, right? And so none of them are like comfy old Earth. And as a result, our search for life on these worlds has always been informed by extremophiles. Really cold, really dry, because these worlds are not very nice. But what's interesting about Kepler 186f and these extrasolar planets is that these could be Earth-like. These can be nice. This could be like California. How much nicer does it get, right? So we don't need to worry about extremophiles anymore. Maybe we could even think about normal life on these other worlds. So yes, extremophiles are intricately tied to the search for life because the planets we're searching for are extreme planets. But I'm hoping that'll change when we start finding Earth-like worlds. And now we're not talking about extremophiles, we're talking about fairly pleasant places. That would be cool. Then I could go to Hawaii as part of my research, Miami Beach and other, instead of Antarctica and the Atacama Desert and Siberia. I'm looking forward to it.
Say how you feel about the fact that the most likely